Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness. All right, as I always like to do, before I introduce our special guest tonight, I want to read two Bible verses. You got to remember and put the blame where blame needs to be. Matthew 18, verse 6. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. And then in Matthew 18, verse 10, take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. And I want to say hello to everyone that comes. If you can, please do a comment to, hi, Tammy. I appreciate that. You're wonderful yourself. God bless you. Oops. Let me get rid of that banner over here. Get back over here. So the special guest today is my friend Daryl Fant. He is an, a survivor of child abuse. He's a thriver, and by thriver, that means we're above a survivor. So he's rose above from being just a survivor. He's actually thriving and he's advocating. It's so good to see you, Tammy. Thanks for coming. Without further ado, welcome here, Daryl. I hope you're doing great.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Darlene. Thank you to Tammy and anyone else out in the audience. I appreciate you guys joining us today. So, I wanted to take this opportunity. This will be my first time speaking publicly about my experiences. I've spoken with family members, friends, therapists. This will be my first time speaking publicly. So I appreciate Darlene giving me this opportunity. I'm looking forward to growing as a speaker and hope that some of the things that I share are helpful or reinforce some of the things that you guys are doing in your own healing journey. I grew up in suburbia. I grew up in a pretty house in a nice neighborhood that had four streets with pretty little homes, forests on both sides. We had a creek in our backyard, and the Colorado River was 2 blocks from my house. So it should have been ideal. Um, the only real problem I had was parents. My father um, started beating my brother and I at a very young age. By the age of 6 or 7, my aunt tried the first intervention. She called my parents to her home and said, "You're going to have to stop beating your son. You're going to break him in a way that he never recovers from." And in my experience, that is one of the big tragedies about child abuse. No matter how much we heal, it's something that stays with us forever. In my case, most of the abuse was physical and emotional. I know other people um, suffer from other forms of abuse, and they're all terrible. We're children who had no defenses and were being harmed by the people that we counted on the most to take care of us, protect us, support us. And they were the ones who ended up putting us in the most danger.
Did I ask
Um,
you? May I
sure.
ask you when did the abuse initially begin?
I know that it started by age 4. It may have happened before then. The way my memory works is as a protection. I only hold on to particularly good and particularly bad memories. So, as from childhood. So, I remember a lot of the traumatic events and I remember some of the highlights, and I just don't remember a lot of the in between things. I
I,
know that I was being beaten by 4 or 5. There's a picture that hangs in my parents' home, and I have a copy of it here in a um, kind of a memories book. And in that picture, I always remember myself being in that picture with a black eye, but I don't actually have one in the photo. Um, but I know that I was already associating with that pain then, and I know it was 2 years later that my aunt tried to do the first intervention with my parents. Uh,
I'm glad that an aunt did that, and I want to let people know that yes, a lot of times when you are so severely abused, that there's a lot of memory gaps in there as well. There's still a lot of memory gaps for me. And some I hope to God I never remember because I do not think I'll be able to handle more than what I've already remembered.
yeah, I think we're probably all still learning about our own experiences and overall childhood trauma. One of the things I was able to do that was really helpful for me was a year ago, I took a week and spent it with my brother, and we talked
Mhm.
about our experiences. We went fishing, so it was just me and him, and we talked about what we did and didn't remember. And at one point, I got really emotional because one of my things is I was 3 years older. So I always felt that I should have been able to find help for us. I should have, it seemed logical that everyone knows your parents aren't supposed to beat you. And if they are beating you, help should be available through family members, the school, the police, however, there should be some kind of help available.
I want you to let
Uh,
everybody know this is Daryl Fant. Just giving the. Can y'all tell him hello? Can you read the chat right there on the comments?
yeah, good to see everybody. Tammy and Jackie, thank you for being with us. I'm sure there's other names that if I scrolled, I would see.
It's,
Appreciate
some
everybody being here with us.
some people are just here and they choose not to chat.
Sure, that's
Some
fine.
people just come in there, and so there's some other people that's in there too. If they feel free to um, say a friendly hello and support Daryl, he would appreciate hearing from anybody. And if you have any questions for him, I'm
If you have any
sure he would do the best
questions,
to his ability to answer as well.
or let me know if you've been through something similar or if you had a different experience. Um, so when my brother and I got together and spent that week together, I broke down and I told him about this time where my dad beat him so hard for so long that I really thought it might kill him. And I tried to describe the incident and what led up to it. And he was like, huh, I don't really remember that one at all. He said, I would have said this other one was my worst beating I ever got. And I didn't remember that one. So thank you, Tammy. So each of us retain things differently, and each of us had our own path towards trying to get some peace. So I was a strong believer in family. I was a strong believer that someone in the family um, had the ability to help us. So first, I went to my uncle, who was my mom's brother, the husband of the aunt who scheduled that first intervention. This was later on when I was in junior high. And I went back to him, told him it was still going on. It was worse. I was worried for my brother. Could he help us? And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go drive to your parents' house, which is about 2 hours from his house. I'm going to talk with your mom. She's my sister. And any authorization she gives me to get involved, whether it's interceding with the police against your father or bringing you to our house, you and your brother to our house, or whatever she allows me to do, I will do. Um, and my mom just refused any help. She said, "What happens in our house is what happens in our house. Um, I don't want you to do anything to help them. I don't want you to do anything to stop it."
Wow.
And
Glad that y'all still survived through all that as well.
again, two different mentalities. One, I believed that, I mean, I, I read all the time. So I think I had kind of a book mentality of no matter how bad it gets, by the end of the book, it gets better. So I thought some kind of salvation would come. My brother went the other way. Like I went to that uncle, and then I eventually went to both of my grandfathers. Um, I'm sorry, I'm reading your note, Tammy. It's interesting that you remember things like a video because, like I said, mine only comes in pieces, and I'm sorry to hear. I'm kind of inferring the form of abuse, and that's terrible. I'm sorry. Um, if I wrote a memoir, it would be called something like, um, I don't have it written down in front of me, but like putting together a broken mirror. All the pieces are there, and you put back everything together. I remember very clearly a lot of the bad things. Um, and I remember very clearly a lot of the good things. What I wish I had was memories of daily life, and I think my mind just kind of overloaded recording the things that it thought it had to. Um, my brother decided he was going to make one heroic stand, and somebody was going to have to help him. So the way our dad beat us was almost the same every time, and we would have bleeding whelps going from our lower back, our buttocks, down our legs. Um, and a lot of times they'd bleed or ooze. And he waited till the last minute before the school bus came, ran out of the house in a pair of short shorts where everybody that day had to see the scars and whelps, fresh whelps on his legs. The school bus driver had to see it. All his teachers had to see it. The counselors and principals walking the halls had to see it, and nothing happened.
Nobody did nothing to protect the child, huh? The
Nobody
children.
did anything. So there's two possibilities. One, somebody at the school district did get involved, and since my mom was a teacher, she was able to talk her way out of it.
Your mom was a teacher and she allowed this?
Yeah, so that that's one of my stressors is you see like it's changed. You get a more fair view of what happened now. But when I was a kid, and if they ever showed abuse on TV, the parents were drug addicts or alcoholics or had been beaten by their parents. My parents didn't have any of that. They both had college degrees. Um, Everybody in my mom's family is on the same page of she had no kind of abuse growing up, no yelling, no hitting, no nothing. And the same with my father. Neither my mom or my father ever said that they had any abuse. My grandparents, my aunts and uncles all say that they didn't. They didn't
May I
drink.
ask,
Sure.
May I ask what age range you are in? You know, because that's important because of note because of how the laws have changed later on. You know.
I'm 51.
Okay, you're still a baby then. I'm 60. So
And since nobody helped my brother, that he decided that was it. I can't do anything more demonstrative than that. So he just got quiet, sucked it up, and when he turned 18, he joined the Coast Guard and said the Coast Guard will take me far away from here, and I don't have to worry about getting sucked back into any kind of immediate life with them. Um,
Tammy gave you a comment.
yes, you are correct. That is, um, I think one of the blessings God gives us is He allows us to kind of shut down. Mine, I don't. I know other people have reported things similar to what mine does, and what my mind does is if I get a certain amount of trauma, I just stop recording. I think it's primarily something that I used in childhood when I was getting a particularly bad beating. Um, but I have used it a few times. My wife reports that if we get into an argument and I feel like I'm backed into a corner, I'm very conflict averse as an adult. But if I can't get out of it, she'll see my mind kind of click and she can tell that I'm not recording what's
Is it,
happening anymore.
is it about like being in one of them fugue states where your mind is just basically drifted away to somewhere just quiet and your mind at peace or something like that? Just I kind of like going to those myself at times where I'm not thinking of nothing. My mind just goes away to a safe place. All I see is light around me. I don't think of nothing. I'm just in a state of peace.
I think
Um,
everybody has their own. Yours is probably pretty common. I really feel like mine just turns off because I'm not aware of the passage of time. I'm sure it's not long, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, something like that.
yeah, I'm
But
not aware of passage of time either. So,
I
you know,
won't
my mind.
remember. Yeah, I won't remember anything. It's just like it went black. And then at some point, I started recording again. Um, like a lot of people, not everybody, but like a lot of people, I tried to bury the worst memories inside and just not deal with them. And that kind of allowed me to have a normal life where I could work and have relationships and be a friend and all of those things. But one of the things I do is I write. And one of the things that I like to write is biographies of local veterans, in particular World War II veterans. I did a series called Last of the Greatest, which was 2 or 3 page interviews with local veterans talking about what they remembered from their World War II experiences. And one of them was a 92-year-old man. He was a black man, African American, and his job was to drive trucks on the islands in the Pacific as we got closer and closer to Japan. So a ship would come in, they would unload whatever they were going to unload, and then he would drive it across the island. And a lot of times it would get reloaded back on airplanes who were going to make bombing runs on Japan. And what he had never told anybody was that he was working, driving when the atomic bomb was the first atomic bomb was loaded on the island he was on, and an airplane took off from there and bombed Japan.
Wow.
So from the time he was 20 or 21 until he was 92, he had carried that pain around. He had asked the Army about it. They wouldn't tell him. There were other drivers driving that day, so maybe he did, maybe he didn't drive it. Um, but it's always hurt him. And that day while we talked, he started crying. And at the end of it, told me that was the best he had felt since he was 22 years old and it originally happened.
Oh,
So I took that as an inspiration to stop holding everything in and start dealing with my own trauma. My wife had already, for years, 3 years, 5 years, tried to talk to me about going to a therapist. But one of the things my parents had told me when I was young was that therapy was for weak minded people who couldn't handle their own problems. So taking advice about therapy from your abuser probably was never a good idea. But no matter what kind of parents you have, the things they say and do have influence over you. So
I
I
can
always believed that I should be strong enough to fix it on my own. So it was only about 2 years ago that I started seeing a therapist.
I'm glad that you took the courage and you got all that going for you too. Daryl's also got a Facebook group. If you want to tell people what the name of that Facebook group is too, so if any of those other survivors want
Sure.
to join it too. But we could still go on with your story in a few minutes, but I want to get that out there where people can look that up too.
Thank you. So the group is called Child Abuse Survivors Public Group. And the idea was there's so much secrecy around childhood abuse. And so many of our parents said it's not something that we talk about and basically protected themselves, but made it look like what they said in our family was good families don't talk about things like that. Um, so, Child Abuse Survivors Public Group. And the idea is that if you're ready and if you're at that point where you want to share parts of your story or your whole story publicly, you can do that. If you want to name your abuser, your parents, your uncle, your grandma, your grandpa, whoever it was, if you want to name them, it gives you a place to do that. Um, the idea is that it takes some of the secrecy away. I know there are, yes, good families do not abuse their child. That is correct. Um, I know there are other private groups, and I'm a member of some private groups also. And I think what they do is valuable. I just also think there's utility for some of us who are ready to talk about our stories publicly. And for some of us, that's the only resource we have to make our parents in any way accountable. Most of us, well, not most of us, but a lot of us, by the time we start dealing with our trauma, have aged out of whatever our state statute of limitation is. In Texas, it's not very long for physical and emotional abuse. For sexual abuse, it's 30 years. So either way, I did not experience sexual abuse, but that's the one that has the longest statute of limitations. But either way, I would have aged out. Um,
I got a question for you.
sure.
Okay, after you got married and you had your kids, did you refrain from letting your kids go to these abusive?
It took a while. I was always there. They've never been there without them. And to his credit, for whatever it's worth, my dad did go out of his way to change his behavior after it was too late, basically. After we're out of the house, he hasn't apologized or talked about it, but he has been a kinder, gentler person. My mom was never the primary physical abuser. She did hit us, but since my dad was so much bigger and stronger, we it her hitting us wasn't that big of a deal. But The thing that was a big deal with my mom is I just think she hated us. I think that she wasn't planning on having us, and it derailed her from the life path she thought she was going to have. She thought my dad would get his political science degree, which he did, and then go on to law school, which he didn't. And she thought she would get her undergraduate degree, which she did, and then go on to veterinary school, which she did not. So think she thought she was going to be a veterinarian married to a lawyer, and she ended up being a teacher married to um, a guy who worked really hard, long hours at a chemical plant.
Her
Um,
lessons, your mama's teaching style was not too good on the home front.
yeah, not on the home front. Interestingly, although she was stern, people really liked her as a teacher. Just she wasn't good on the home front. She wasn't a
Yeah,
good mom.
nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors. All these other people say, "Oh, this person was a good person. This person got a good personality. This person would take their shirt off, take their shirt off to help anybody." It's like, but you're not living with a person. You do not really know how a person is behind closed doors.
Sure. So let's talk about that example. My neighborhood, like I said before, the main part of the neighborhood was only 4 streets, 4 blocks. So my close friend who lived at the other end, so 4 blocks away, his dad hit him, his dad hit his sister, and his dad hit their mother. And at one point, his dad broke his sister's collarbone.
Oh,
So the house right next to them, a boy lived there with his 2 sisters. The boy was, I think, 2 years older than me, and the sisters were my age. My understanding is the sisters weren't abused at all, but the boy, um, his dad thought he was going to be gay, and it turns out he was gay or is gay. And his dad tried to beat that out of him. And he went to stay multiple times with that other friend that I told you about just to heal, just to physically heal so he could get back to his life. And in the 1 block from me, there was a girl whose parents beat her so badly that she also had to come out of the home multiple times, stay with other people to heal. And when I was growing up, I didn't know any of that because nobody talked about it, including the kids didn't talk about it to each other. The boy whose dad beat him so much drove me to school every day for a year. I had no idea. I didn't tell him what was going on with me. He didn't tell me what was going on with him. Um, there was just so much secrecy about abuse back then.
right.
Not
It's
just
taboo to
me.
talk. It's
Go ahead.
taboo to talk about.
Sure, but you look back now and how much might have changed if we'd have all talked about it. Um, I had another friend in the neighborhood who was not abused at all, had 4 brothers. They weren't abused at all. But his house, um, my brother and I used to go over there and play a lot. And a lot of times, parents will, after an hour or 2 hours, when they want to start making dinner or whatever, they'll ask their guests to go home. That's pretty common. His mom never asked us to go home. And I only found out as an adult that she had told her children that we needed somewhere safe that we could walk to. So anytime we came there, we were allowed to stay as long as we wanted to. Um, So they're one of the people that I would credit with, even though it was imperfect, the cycle of abuse. It didn't get me out of bad things happening. They did find some way to give me a break from it and to do something. Um, Another person who found a way to help that I didn't realize until I was an adult, until the last couple of years, was I didn't join a lot of clubs in high school. I did
Right.
honor society and things like that that they just kind of put you in based on your grades and things. But for some reason, I was invited to join the debate team. I didn't know why, but a couple of my other friends were on the debate team. So I said okay, and I did it, and I liked it. I was good at it. Um, but I found out a year ago that the lady who coached the debate team had an abusive father, and she looked for kids that she thought had a hard home life, invited them to join speech and debate so that after school they had somewhere safe to go,
Wow.
and an average of 1 weekend a month we would travel to another school and have 1 or 2 nights where we were in a hotel with our team members, so she knew we were safe then.
Wow. Kudos to her. So you went ahead and found out these neighbor stories. How old were you when you found out the different people's stories?
It just started a couple of years ago. After I started therapy, I started sharing my story on Facebook or talking to friends, and then they started telling me their own stories or about people that we knew in common. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's that common everywhere, but the little bitty neighborhood we grew up in just had a lot of particularly physical and emotional abuse in that neighborhood. Um,
That's why when they try to give the numbers out about any kind of abuse, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, or anything, and they say like 1 in 4 girls or whatever, and so many boys, and all this, and I'm like, there is no number that really depicts how many kids are abused or sexually abused because so many cases do not go reported.
sure. One of the things that I have found to be true, and y'all can speak to this or type your notes in or whatever, but honestly, when I was growing up, I never heard about sexual abuse. When I was in college, I never heard about sexual abuse. And when I lived in New York, I never heard about sexual abuse. When I moved back to Texas, um, there were several times where I had friends who were women, and one of them would say something about their experience. And if there were 10 women in the room, three other women would say something about having had a similar experience. So it had been
Wow.
going on that whole time. I just was out of the loop on it. I wasn't in groups of people that talked about it. Um, and now that I'm sharing my story about my physical abuse, I hear from a lot of women who I know that if I hadn't said anything, never would have said anything to me, who went through abuse, and a lot of theirs was sexual. Um,
A lot of
and
times that the people before they're perpetrating, doing the sexual abuse, they groom them and which with physical abuse and everything, they're groomed, that way.
sure, and just because I think it always needs to be said anytime it comes up, one of the most horrible things I hear about, and I'm sure this is not news to any of y'all, is when a lot of girls are abused by a man, whether it's their father, their mother's boyfriend, their grandfather, their uncle, an overwhelming percentage of the time their mother knew.
My
And
mother was one of my perpetrators too, and my stepmom was too. So did not just go with the genders of male; it
sure,
actually went with the females that were violently abusive to me too. So
sure. So that's scary that they're the abuser, but it's also scary that I think we all have a belief when we're born that our mother's our protector. So when we find out that they aren't, it's terrifying. Um,
yeah, at times when I go back and people tell me, "So why can't you just go ahead and um, look at like my siblings, two of my siblings, and said I need to look at them as a hero?" I said I can't look at people as a hero that violated and sold me, exploited me, and sold me to child pornography, child all that kind of stuff. I said they were the parents that's supposed to love and take care of you and supposed to nurture you. So it's like, excuse me, don't tell me how I should act or how I should behave or how I should think because a hero is somebody that's good to kids or good to whomever that treats a person respectfully with lots of love and compassion and care and gentleness like a parent should.
sure. So I think one of the universal truths is that children want to love their parents. So anytime I see someone who doesn't love their parents, I immediately, my feeling is it's because of the parents. That parent did something either so horrible or so many things over time that they broke that part of the child that they were born with. I don't think they're, I mean, less than 1 in a million children, I think, are born not wanting to love and have a relationship with their parents. So if,
Yeah, I'm at the point where, where I look at and says, I loved my parents, but I hated their behavior.
yeah, I guess I
That's the way
kind
I
of,
look at it. Like I hated their actions. I've always hoped that they would amend and try to apologize for their behavior or whatever.
right,
Because I always wanted that mother daughter type of thing or mother daddy type of thing that was closer and nothing sexual or violent.
sure. And I think that's what we all want. And we all are at a different place in our thing. In 5 years from now, we may be different, but mine currently is the my and mine wasn't. It sounds like yours was pretty black and white. Your parents did some really horrible things that you nobody
Yes.
should ever get over. My parents did the really bad things, but they also did some good things. My dad was a Boy Scout leader for us.
Oh man.
Um, he um, wasn't good at completing it, but in his heart, he wanted us to have nice things. So he would try to build us things. They didn't get finished, but I think it probably showed that somewhere in there he had a good heart that he would try to do it. Um, he's a good storyteller. He could tell jokes. My mom is still one of the best cooks that I know. We never went hungry. Um, but the bad things they did to me tremendously outweigh the good things. So 2 years ago, I wrote them a long letter. These are my memories. I've asked you to talk about it. Every time that I asked to talk about it, you said no. I'm at the point where I need some kind of resolution. So that's going to have to be taking you completely out of my life. As of the time you get this letter, I plan on that being the last time we ever communicate. And that was 2 years ago. And since then, we haven't communicated at all.
And I think that
Um,
also protects your kids and stuff like that as well when you go and do something like that. And that's the way I did. When I took the toxic parents out of my life, which all of them's deceased now,
uh-huh.
but whenever I took them out of my life, I felt like I was protecting my kids,
Sure.
and
So,
they would now that my birth mom's dead, one of my kids was mad at me, saying, "Mom, why'd you keep her away from me? I heard that she would have been good." That's according to one of the siblings, who thinks I should look at her like a hero. You know what I mean? That's what my son believed, and now it's like, Mom, thank you for keeping us safe from her, because I'm finding out more and more truths about them, because all they want to do is get to you and demean you and to hurt your reputation and come down on you. And he said, well, he tells me now, thank you for protecting me.
yeah, I'm not sure why the family dynamics or sibling dynamics are so different. That's common. In my case, um, I was a really good kid outside of going to my uncle and my two grandfathers. I never really did anything against my parents. My brother did that one thing where he thought somebody at school would help him and nobody helped him. He never did anything else. My sister was 9 years younger. Okay, so here's one of the great things about my parents.
Right.
When I was 8 and my brother was 5, my mom called us into the back room, the guest room, and sat us down. We both remember this clearly. And she said, I'm going to have a baby, but I want you to know that I've talked to your dad and we've worked out a deal where he will never beat that child. So I'm 8 and my brother's 5. And what we both interpreted that as, even though we didn't talk about it for 30 years, was you two boys are still going to get beaten, but this new kid who ended up being a girl is never going to get beaten.
That's messed up.
So we took it as you're going to get the same number of beatings you're getting now. Plus, if your father is angry at this child, you'll probably get that beating also. But you should think that this is a good thing because I'm protecting this child. And honestly, when I was little, I did think it was a good thing. I did think, oh, this child is being protected. Good. As an adult, I think if you have the ability to protect that child, why would you not also use it on me and my brother? Why
Exactly.
would we go through 9 more years of abuse for me and 12 more years of abuse for my brother? If you can stop this, why on earth would you not stop this? So
Why
that's
couldn't
one
you
of my,
made a deal with him about us? Why couldn't you protect us? Have a deal, don't hurt my kids no more. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, or even just help us when my uncle came or my grandfather came or my other grandfather came. Why couldn't you help us with one of those? Anything.
Because they would have took you out of that situation had they. But I think what it was, like some parents want to do is keep the kids around where they can claim on the income taxes and stuff.
Well, okay. So here's my theory. And I talked to him about my brother, and he doesn't strongly agree or strongly disagree. He thinks it's possible, but he said, I think they're just broken. But my theory is my dad may have just been broken, but my mom started um, getting horses when I was about 5. And if she would have been a veterinarian and my dad would have been a lawyer, I don't think financially it would have been a problem. but horses are very expensive. And
Right.
she had a lot of them. She had up to 15 horses at the same time as a teacher married to a chemical plant worker living in a much nicer house than any of my dad's friends that we ever went to. We probably went to five of his friends' houses who had the same job he did, and none of them were as nice as our house. So they were overspending.
Oh, wow.
So I think that the horses and the lifestyle were more important to her than our safety. And I think the fact that she saw our being born as what derailed her from being a veterinarian and my dad from becoming a lawyer, we deserved it. If our being beaten helped her get her horses and keep her horses, then that was fair. Um,
Wow.
I know these are middle class problems, but they both had always told us from the time since we were super young, all you have to do is get good grades and we will have everything in place so you can go to college. Great. Um, my parents both went to Texas A&M. I thought I would probably go to Texas A&M, but my cousin, who was a couple of years older, went to the University of Texas. She invited me up for a visit, and I fell in love with it. So I only applied to the University of Texas. I was immediately accepted, and a whole summer went by where um, I had been approved for a dorm room. I was going to room with my best friend growing up. Um, and ended up that about 20 of my closest friends all went to the same college at the same time. They all had a normal college experience, but 2 or 3 days before I was supposed to leave, I was already packing the car and everything. My mom said, okay, there is no college money. I can't afford to really send you to school, but I'll figure out how to make the tuition payments. But I'm not going to be able to afford to put you in a dorm. I found a handicapped gentleman who's in his 40s. If you live in his house and take care of him, he'll let you live in his house. So she just spent all of the money. Like it was there, but vet bills cost more than she thought they were going to be. Horse food cost more than she thought it was. We had a 1 acre yard, so you can't keep 15 horses there. So she had to rent pasture. That cost more than she thought it was going to cost. She just spent it all, maybe a little bit at a time. But eventually she spent it all.
You know what
Also,
I think is? Well, I'll tell you something that's ironic that between your daddy and my daddy.
uh-huh.
My daddy was also he worked with Cub Scouts. He was a Cub Scout master, but he was still violent. Okay, and he also was a chemical engineer. He worked for Dow Chemical
Interesting.
and a truck driver too. At that, he had to drive the truck around to different areas where he had to work to. So
So,
yeah, so I kind of like look. We got so much in common. It's funny, that
yeah, you never know what's true and what's not true, and what people blame and whatever. But when I about the time I graduated from high school or when I was in college, my mom did tell me that the chemical plant my father worked for had covered up several chemical spills,
uh-huh.
and that I would see my father for years take 10 or 11 aspirin at a time. Um, so there was some kind of physical pain he was dealing with. but at the same time, he could turn it on and off
Right.
because when we were on a scout trip, he never yelled at me or hit me. If my relatives came over for a holiday, he never yelled at me or hit me. If we went to someone else's house, he never yelled at me or hit me. So it was something he could control. He, whatever happened at the plant may have played a factor, but
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that he could control never hitting my sister. He did yell at my sister, but he never hit her. With my sister, whatever deal he made with my mom was evidently a very binding deal because he really never like she says he never laid a finger on her. But he would yell at her and he would go in her room if he was mad and break her things, her
Wow.
toys, her pictures, her radio, which he had never done with my brother and I. Um, all the stuff that we had from the time we were 5 years old, we still had it when we graduated from high school.
Ooh,
Um, but he would hit us, but he never touched our stuff. With her, he would break her stuff, but never touch her. Um,
that was a way of putting fear in her.
yeah, it was a way of letting his anger out without violating whatever deal he made with my mom.
Still today,
Um,
you know, they classify that as abuse too when they go and do like destroy
oh,
somebody's property.
sure, it's emotional abuse, and I'm not sure what else, but for sure, emotional abuse. And when we were kids, she hated our parents in a way tremendously magnified from the way my brother and I felt about our parents. She would tell them all the time. She'd say, "I hate you. When I turn 18, you'll never see me again." Um, and then she ended up living right next door to him. She's lived next door to him since she got home from college. Um,
Did they
my
pay for her college?
no, well, yes, they did. They did pay for hers, but it was over several years because my brother and I, they paid my tuition, but nothing else. And I finished in exactly 4 years. My brother went to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard paid for his, and he got his undergraduate and two master's degrees in engineering. But the Coast Guard paid for all of his. And hers, they paid for, but it was a semester here and then a semester there and then a semester somewhere else. Because she kept moving and she never, I think she went for 6 semesters before she got any credits.
Wow.
Um, and then when she got a little older, she went back to school where she paid for it and she got her, I think it's called a radiology tech certification.
Right.
And she did fine at that because by then she was invested on her own. Um, and I think that's been
Yeah.
a good job for her. And her husband has a really good job.
I'll be glad when you go ahead and you do your book. You know, I'll be glad when you go to do that as well. I look
Yes.
forward. You'll have a lot of supporters here.
Thank you so much. And I feel like I know we've been talking for an hour, but I feel like we could probably
It's
do
not
another
limited.
one.
We can keep going. It's all right.
So,
We can keep going.
well, I've got family members who will come home sometime after 3, so I want to wrap then. But I'd love to do another one. Like I said, we'll be traveling for the next 6 weeks, or it'll be end up
Okay.
being 8 weeks total. But I'd love to do something like this again, and then talk about kind of the idea for the book, and then I'd like to turn this into a speaking platform where I could go to um, schools, or I know they have in-service day for teachers where they learn about different things, maybe churches, or I can talk about my experience, but also what people can do that might benefit a child if they suspect that they need something. Because I think that would have made the world of difference to my brother and I, just knowing that someone saw and cared and tried to do something. Even some of the people who did do something, we didn't realize why they did it until 30 years later.
Could you tell us what are some of the pet peeves that you have heard people judge you and say things similar? Did you hear things such as, why don't you get over it? The past is the past, da da da. What are some of the things that you
You,
heard, or
you've probably seen me post about it, but one of the biggest ones is at some point you have to move on and forgive them. And I don't believe that at all. I know forgiveness is biblical, and I do try to do things that are biblical, but I think abusing your own child breaks such a fundamental law that the child is not responsible for forgiving that adult. If God wants to forgive them, great. If the child wants to forgive them, great. I don't think the child's under any obligation to do so because what they did was so fundamentally wrong. I think
right?
everybody should know that a 230-year-old man, I'm sorry, a 230-pound man hitting a 6-year-old child as hard as he can is not right. It's not.
Right.
So I don't think that child owes that person anything. I don't think you have to have contact with them. I don't think you have to help them if they go into a nursing home. I think they kind of made their own bed. Oh, do you think your parents had narcissistic traits? I'm not an expert, but I definitely think my mother did and does. I think she can justify just about anything um, if it brings her what she wants, increases her happiness, or increases her safety. I did not lie as a child. That was one of the things early on my dad told me he did not believe in was lying. So I did not lie as a child. Two lies I remember telling are we were on a horse ride. My mom wanted to get on someone else's property. She borrowed my knife to try to pick their lock and broke it. And it was a knife that I'd gotten from my grandparents. And she told me to tell my dad that I broke it. So that was the first lie I ever remember telling. The
And
next
I bet
lie,
you got beat for that too, didn't you?
I would think so. I don't specifically remember it. It would not. It would not. It would be normal for me to have gotten beaten for that. I don't remember that specifically. And then I didn't. I don't remember lying again until when she told me 2 days before I was supposed to go to college that there wasn't any money. She had not told my dad there wasn't any money. And she told me that it would break his heart if he knew they didn't have enough money to send us to college. So I should tell him that it was my idea not to go in a room in a dorm with my best friend for all of my childhood and have a meal plan on campus, but to go be the caretaker for a handicapped man I'd never met before and fend for myself. Buy all my own food, all my own clothes, all my own medical, all my own car expenses. That was my
But
idea.
it seemed like she scared of your father herself for being honest about what she was doing.
I think she was scared of having to give up the horses. They did have a volatile relationship where they both argued all the time and they both yelled at each other all of the time. I
Did they drink?
never saw either of them touch each other.
Did they
And
ever drink?
no, they weren't drinkers. They didn't use drugs. They all of the classic excuses. I don't see where they had any of them. They weren't abused. They weren't alcoholics. They weren't drug abusers.
I
Just
would,
like
I would, I would even portray your father as being narcissistic, possibly because he was so volatile and explosive and just wanted total control.
certainly possible. Like I said, I'm not an expert. And my mom's is a lot more obvious to me, but he may have also. Almost every time he beat us, it wasn't like on TV where somebody would just fly off the handle and start hitting you. He would tell us, "You're in trouble. Go to your closet or my closet or whatever, and I'll be there in a minute, and you'll get your beating." It was very controlled until he started hitting us, and then it felt out of control. Um, but he wasn't just lashing out. Um, One of the things that is so frustrating is the only things I ever remember getting beaten for were not listening, not remembering, or not paying attention.
Can I ask you, did he ever do things like even give you blows to the head or anything like that
Oh,
later?
yeah. So, yes, always from here up, one of our biggest things was he would ask my brother and I to get him a tool. Like I said, he would work on things but never finish them. So, one of the things was he would work on cars a lot, and he would need a tool out of a shed behind our house that was not organized at all. And my brother and I had no way to know what one tool was from another. So he would ask us for something. We would look at him. He'd say, "You better go get it." We would run back to the shed. And the whole time, our hearts are pounding, we're sweating, and we try to figure out what it is and bring it back to him. And then almost every time, for being the wrong thing or for taking too long, he would take it out of our hand and hit us in the head with it. So I told you before I had really long hair.
Yeah.
Now it's not long, but I've never um, like shaved my head or anything because I just feel like there's going to be scars and dings. I've been hit with wrenches, pliers, metal coffee cans, small hammers, the back of a machete, sticks, all in my head, but always above the hairline. And
No
whenever
wonder you had forgetfulness and stuff like that as well, because blows to the head does brain damage.
yeah, I hope I have suffered minimal brain damage, but I mean, you never know.
Yeah, when it,
But
like I used to be hit in the head also, and they did a test on me at the neurological, well, this thing to find out what I'm capable of using my arms and hands and everything. They wanted to rule out if I had epilepsy or early Alzheimer's or all this different stuff. They wanted to rule everything out, so they did these tests, and they said that, excuse me, it showed up that I had head injuries right around the part where, like, when you're reading and you to comprehension. Back when I was 9 years old, that part of my brain was damaged when I was 9 years old.
yeah, it's certainly possible. I've never been tested for anything like that. I guess it wouldn't hurt. I just never have. Um,
But it makes sense, and so the
sure.
more they beat you, the worse they did, and instead it was causing more. Jackie wrote you right here.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Yes. So that's two differences between me and my brother. One, I can't do any kind of projects. Like I'm just now getting to where I can do simple repairs around the house or go out and clean the garage or things like that because I just associate it with my dad beating us. My brother went the other way and decided he was going to master everything um, on his own, where he never had to ask for help from somebody like my dad. So he can do wiring, plumbing, sheetrock, fix a car. We just went two other ways to protect ourselves. I avoided it, and he embraced it, but where he could do it on his own. And if I appreciate all the questions and interest and comments. If we can, I'd like to wrap for today. But like I said, I'd
Okay,
love to come back in 8 weeks and do a part two. And
okay,
I'll
Busher wrote you a couple of things. Hello, sir. God bless you. And we got God
thank
bless
you so
your
much.
family members. God bless you all.
And I appreciate all of y'all. And I know everybody's got their own stories. So just one more invitation. If you're just logging on, I do have the Facebook group, Child Abuse Survivors public group. If you're interested in sharing your story or parts of your story publicly, it's a place where you can do that, and other people can try to give you support from their own experiences. Thanks so much,
Plus, you could
everybody.
probably hit him up at Facebook too, send him friends requests, explain who you are and all this. I'm sure he wouldn't mind talking to you if you have a problem or if you got a concern. And you can look me up as well at Facebook, and I'll be glad to
Yeah,
support you as well.
sure. Yeah, send something in Messenger or send it to the Facebook group. And even though it is a public Facebook group, there is an option to post anonymously, which a lot of people do a couple of times until they get comfortable, which is fine.
Yes.
Thank you all. I appreciate being here. This was a very good opportunity for me, and I'm very grateful to all of you. Thank you so much.
Just let me know when you'll be free to do it again, and I will be glad to set you up and have you on here, and you can advocate. You can talk more about anything you would like because
Yeah,
you are an advocate and you have a voice, and you did an awesome job. I want to appreciate what you did.
thank you so much. I appreciate you and all of you. Thank you.
Bushra, who do you want to contact you? You can look me up at Facebook under Darlene J. Clark, and I'll be glad to. You could send me a friend's request, and I can add you if we're not friends already. If we are friends, just send me a text message there also. I'll be glad to communicate with you. And I want to thank you again, Daryl, for being brave enough and sharing this. You did an amazing job. This was your first time ever. I want to give you the courage to continue telling and sharing your story.
Thank you so
There-
much. It was a great opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and God bless you.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.